Well, rather than debate the rights and wrongs of US gun laws, again, instead we're going to talk to two people intimately and directly involved in two prior mass shootings. Joining me for Denver is Tom Mauser, the father of a victim of the 1999 Columbine massacre, and in Blacksburg, the author Lucinda Roy, who is a professor at Virginia Tech University, where she taught the gunman responsible for the 2007 shooting. Thank you both very much for joining us tonight. First of all, if I can talk to you, Tom Mauser. I imagine every day is a hard day, but does it make it worse when you're reminded by yet another shooting in a school?
Oh, absolutely. It takes you back to that day, and you can just imagine what those parents are going through because you went through it too. And
when you look at the profile of Nicholas Cruz, orphaned, I gather he recently lost his mother, disruptive, expelled from school, apparently not allowed in the area, with a backpack on YouTube saying to people that he wanted to be a professional school shooter. It must break your heart that nothing was able to be done to stop him.
That's right. He fits the profile. This is the profile of someone who was troubled and dangerous, and yet we did nothing about it.
What do you think is the problem there? Is it a lack of coordination, a lack of care, a lack of concern about what's happened previously in order to try and make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I think there is a lack of coordination, for example, in some cases between the police and the schools and other organizations that need to know what's going on. And there is also a sense of there's nothing we can do about it anyhow, because, oh, well, that could affect his rights. And as a result, we're paralyzed. And we have law enforcement that feels that there's just not much they can do about cases like this to stop it. Well, and it's simply not true.
Well, your son Daniel was so cruelly killed with the others, and I wonder what parents at Columbine did afterwards to promote the very things you're talking about now, to say, you know, we must make sure this never happens again. And I wonder if eventually it just fell on deaf ears.
I think some changes were made. Certainly, the law enforcement learned that they had to go into the schools against an active shooter, not just wait outside like they did at Columbine. The schools are much more prepared for these attacks. But in terms of really stopping the attacks and keeping guns away from people who make these attacks, no, very, very little has been done.
And yet, you know, we have President Trump speaking directly to the children of America, saying that he's going to make the schools safe, and no talk of guns. And we have a White House, presumably, that doesn't want to change the right to bear arms.
That's right. I mean, the president made it into that office with a lot of support from the National Rifle Association. He is not going to speak badly about guns. And so long as we're not speaking of guns as part of this issue, we're not going to get anywhere.
Thank you very much. I want to...
The president's...
Sorry, I want to turn to, thank you, I want to turn to Lucinda Roy, because you taught the man that went on to kill 32 people at Virginia Tech, Sing-Ha Cho. You taught him, and you had fears and worries. What happened?
I reported the student to a number of different entities at university, including law enforcement and dean of students and so on, because I knew that it was very difficult for there to be a kind of consensus about what needs to be done. So I always tried to make sure I got as many people involved as possible.
But take us through why you were so concerned about this student.
This was a student who was 23 or 22 years old. He had not really spoken much since he was 3 years old. He suffered from something called selective mutism, which meant that he didn't speak out loud very often in social situations. But he also seemed very angry, and he wrote an angry poem about a class, and I didn't feel that it was safe to leave him in the class. Unfortunately, the only option I had was to try to work with him myself, so that's what I did. But things have changed greatly since that time. And for the most part, you can get help for students, but the trouble is you can still only get it for 2 or 3 days often, and then they can come back to the classroom because there just is not enough support for mental health and not enough funds for it. So unless we try to look at that as well as the gun issue, we'll still be in trouble.
Yes, and I see that Tom Mauser is nodding in agreement with you. So you have a situation, Lucinda Roy, where you have a student kills 32 people, and the trauma in the whole college must be horrific. But yet I imagine if you debate the right to have a gun, a number of students in the university would still say, we believe it's the American way, we believe it's part of our identity. So you have got that terrible dilemma.
Many of the students did lobby for guns and wanted to have the right to bring guns to campus so that they could defend themselves. And in fact, the NRA tries to stoke that kind of thing as much as possible. So it can be difficult to try to get some communication through the noise and make sure that people understand that as long as America is in denial, it will keep slaughtering its children, which is exactly what's happening.
But what happens with each one? It happened after Columbine, happened after Sandy Hook, was that everybody says, oh, this is going to be the tipping point. This is going to be the one which really kind of kickstarts a change in American culture, and it never happens. But I wonder if you think there might be a generational change, that some of the children have seen, with social media as well, have seen these terrible massacres and so forth, might adopt a different attitude going forward. What do you think?
That's so true. And I go around the country talking about troubled students and campus safety. And one of the things that I've understood is that this is the first lockdown generation. And it's so ridiculous that adults still think that they can't talk with young people about this, because young people live it every day. And they are incredibly brave. And they know that something needs to be done because they're living in classes that are terrorist sites. So we really do have to do something, and what's inspiring is to see how many young people are coming forward and are going to make sure that things do change.
Let me put that to Tom. Do you notice a sea change in the younger generation, in fact, the generation that went through the horror of Columbine?
Yes, I do see that. And I think especially young people are asking and should be asking, is this the kind of world I want to live in? Because really the gun lobby in America is saying the only way to be safe is to have more guns, teachers with guns, people carrying concealed weapons around, openly carrying weapons. That's the only way to be safe. And I think they're asking themselves that question. Is this the kind of country we want to live in?
Thank you both very much.